White bean. Once upon a time away, way over in China, there was born a little baby boy, and his mother named him Akim. He was the fattest, roly-polyest little baby boy that you ever could imagine. And when he grew bigger, he sat on the mud floor of the little Chinese house and played with the chickens and the ducks and the piggies and the dog, while his father and mother worked in their little Chinese garden growing beans and turnips and cabbages. When the beans and turnips and cabbages were ready for market, the mother gathered them and put them in a big basket and hung the basket from the end of a bamboo pole. Then, because she wanted to take little Akim with her, she put him in another basket and tied that basket to the other end of the bamboo pole. Then she lifted the bamboo pole to her shoulder, and she walked along, and she walked along, and the beans and the turnips and the cabbages swung along and swung along, and baby boy Akim swung along all the way to market. Now, usually little Akim was a good little baby boy, but sometimes he got tired and sometimes he got hungry, and then he would open his mouth and cry, "Wah!" Then his mother would shake her finger at him and say, "If you don't stop crying, that doctor in the big white house over there will come and steal you." And she would point at the house on the side of the hill where our missionary doctor lived. Then little Akim would put his head right down in the basket and try to get out of sight, because he didn't want any doctor to come and find him if he was looking for a baby that was crying. And every time he cried, every time, his mother said, "If you don't stop crying, that doctor in the big white house over there will come and steal you." Well, one day when little Akim put his head away down in the basket to try to stop crying, there at the bottom of the basket he saw a big white shiny bean. He played with it and he played with it. Then he sucked it and he sucked it. Then he tried to poke it into his nose, and he poked it and he poked it. And all of a sudden it did. It slipped right up inside of his nose. And he cried, "Wah!" And his mother said, "If you don't stop crying, that doctor in the big white house over there will come and steal you." And little Akim put his head down inside the basket again and tried to stop crying, and by the time he stopped crying, he was afraid to tell his mother about the bean in his nose, because he knew he would get a big spank for poking beans up inside his nose. Several days later, the father came in from his work in the garden and said, "Mother, I do declare, one side of that little boy's nose looks bigger than the other side." Well now," said the mother. "He's so fat and roly-poly that it's awful hard to tell which side of him is fatter than the other." But a few days later, the mother woke up one morning and screamed, for coming out of Akim's nose was a little white bean sprout with two tiny green leaves on it. "Father, father, come quick!" she cried. "Our little boy is turning into a bean vine. Will the roots go up into his head? Will the roots go down into his stomach? Will he grow beans?" The father came running in, and when he saw the bean sprout, he tried to pull it out, but he couldn't. Then he tried to push it out, but he couldn't. Then he tried to squeeze it out, but he couldn't. So he said, "Mother, we'll have to take him over to the hospital and let the doctor." "Oh, no, no," cried the mother. "The doctor will steal him." "Mother, mother, don't talk like that," said the father. "You know he's a kind doctor. He's a Christian doctor, and he can get that bean out. You surely don't want our little boy to turn into a bean vine and grow beans, do you?" So they wrapped Akim up in a blanket and carried him to the doctor's house away up on the side of the hill. Come in," said the doctor when he saw the bean sprout in the little boy's nose. "Don't be frightened. We'll soon have that old bean out. Just put him on the table here." Akim screamed and kicked and struggled, but you know what the doctors do. The doctor just gave him some medicine to smell, and soon little Akim was fast asleep. Then the doctor operated a little bit, and out came the old bean. "There you are, mother," he said. "Now Akim won't turn into a bean vine. Carry him home while he is asleep, then he won't be frightened when he wakes up. And bring him again tomorrow morning, and I'll put another band-aid on his nose." So they carried him home again, and when Akim woke up, he could breathe through his nose again, and he wasn't frightened any more. And the next day he didn't even cry when the doctor put the band-aid on. Now you are not frightened of me any more, are you? Said the doctor. And Akim shook his head and said, Mm-mm. Then come again tomorrow morning, and I'll put another band-aid on, said the doctor. And Akim nodded his little head and said, Hmm. So they went again the next day, and the doctor put another band-aid on his nose. And they went again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day after that was Sabbath. And after the doctor put the new band-aid on, he said, Wouldn't you like to stay to Sabbath school today? We have such lovely songs to sing, and such lovely stories to tell, and such lovely pictures to look at. And the father said, I don't mind if I do. And the mother said, I would be pleased to. And Akim said, Hmm. So they stayed to Sabbath school, and they heard the lovely stories, and they saw the lovely pictures, and heard the children singing, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And they just loved it. And the doctor said, You don't have to come every day anymore. Akim's nose is all better now. But won't you come to Sabbath school again next Sabbath, and we'll tell you some more lovely stories, and we'll show you some more lovely pictures, and we'll sing you some more lovely songs. And the father said, I don't mind if I do. And the mother said, I'd be pleased to. And Akim said, Hmm. So they came again the next Sabbath, and the next Sabbath, and the next Sabbath, and the next. And it wasn't very long before you could hear them singing in their little Chinese house in the middle of the little Chinese garden. Yes, Jesus loves me, the Bible tells me so. And Akim grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till at last he was big enough to go to school. And where do you think he went to school? He went to our mission school, and Akim was the happiest boy in all of China.